Macrocenia. Macrocenia were unique to South America, and they were endemic, which means they were found there and nowhere else on Earth, and they were actually the last of their species. They were unrelated to any modern mammal, but to me they looked a bit like a cross between a horse and a tapir. And they are believed to have lived in herds, and they were probably preyed upon by Smilodon. But, of course, the isolation of these animals came to an end when Central America, which became the land bridge, formed, and new breeds of mammal came to colonise South America. And unfortunately, they disappeared. These animals disappeared about 12 or 10,000 years ago because of climate changes that affected their habitat. And here is the range of these animals. Right, now the next place I'm going to tell you about is Madagascar. And by that I don't mean the movie franchise Madagascar. I mean the island off the east coast of Africa. Madagascar is today one of the most unique places for wildlife because it's probably the world's centre for weird wildlife. But there have been giant animals there. I'm going to start with the animal that has probably fascinated me more than any other extinct creature. It is Aepyornis Maximus, aka the elephant bird. Now, the elephant bird was the largest bird that has ever lived. When I say the largest, I mean it would have stood well over 3 metres tall, could probably weigh more than half a tonne, and it laid the biggest egg ever discovered. As you can see here, that is an elephant bird egg, fully constructed. That is a modern-day ostrich egg, which lays the largest egg around today. And that is a hummingbird egg, which is the smallest bird in the world. The elephant bird was not a predator, it was a herbivore, so it fed on fruit and plants. But, incredibly, in the 1950s or 60s, a young David Attenborough actually went to Madagascar for the programme Zoo Quest, where, right here, he actually put together an elephant bird egg from fragments, and it took him well over an hour, and he used a lot of adhesive tape to put it together. And he spent, of course, he actually still has that egg today. It's actually one of his most treasured possessions. He actually made a documentary about the elephant bird in 2011 called Attenborough and the Giant Egg. But I first came across the elephant bird in 2008 when I was in primary school. I came across the elephant bird, and I've always had a fascination and passion for birds ever since I was a boy. And the fact that this colossal bird once roamed Madagascar absolutely bewitched me. And to this day, no one's entirely sure how the elephant bird died out. I mean, it could have been climate change, where much of its swampy forest habitat was turned into desert, or it could have been when humans arrived on the island and cut down a lot of the forests they browsed in. They might have hunted elephant birds, but I mean, as we all know today, a modern-day ostrich has a kick that's powerful enough to shatter a man's rib cage and potentially open a man's stomach, and a cassowary has a kick that can rip open a man's stomach. So I'm pretty sure a kick from a fully grown elephant bird would have killed someone outright. I mean, they might have hunted a younger elephant bird, but it was more than likely they would have also poached their eggs, which might have been a great source of nourishment, or it also could have been a been when human settlers brought chickens to the island, and they brought along with them diseases that the elephant birds had no immunity to, and that of course could. And truth is, we may never know, but I personally think it might have been a combination of all those factors, because around the 17th century was when the elephant bird disappeared. To me, that is one of the biggest tragedies, because this was a phenomenal creature, and it might have been incredible to see in the wild. And here is the range of the elephant birds. Now, the next extinct animal I'm going to show you from Madagascar is this. This is Megaladapis, I think that's how it's pronounced, which is the giant lemur. And when I say giant, I mean this animal could grow as big as a fully grown modern day mountain gorilla. And it was one of the largest primates that has ever lived. And of course it was most likely a herbivore, which meant it fed on plant matter, but from its canine teeth show that it probably would have used them in defence like a modern day gorilla. And of course, these animals probably went extinct around the same time as the elephant bird because of habitat loss and quite possibly hunting by human settlers. And that is probably what drove these creatures to extinction. But they were probably harmless unless they were provoked, frightened, cornered, or protecting young. Of course, here is the range of the giant lemurs. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is one of the least known animals of Madagascar that went extinct in the wild only a few decades ago. It is the Madagascan Giant Tortoise. This was one of the largest tortoises on the planet, and it was a true icon of Madagascar. And of course, it probably grew to be about just a third smaller than the Galapagos Giant Tortoise. But I mean this animal was a bit like elephants in Africa. It helped the forests and grasslands it lived in grow, because when it would consume leaves or fruit, it would quite often carry the seeds of them in its stomach, and then its droppings would spread the seeds out and help them grow. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how this animal went extinct in the wild. It might have been humans that did it, because they probably would have hunted them for their shell, for their meat, and for their eggs. And it might have also been habitat loss and invasive species like farm animals. And they are extinct in the wild, but there are a few handfuls of them in captive zoos in some parts of the world, and there are talks about trying to bring them back from extinction in the wild with a breeding program. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if that can work, but I mean, it's worth a shot if there are any left in captivity that can be bred. I mean, it's worth a shot. This was their range as well. Now, the next place I'm going to show you is New Zealand. Now, New Zealand, as many people know, is famous for the Middle-earth movies, but for wildlife lovers, it's also very famous for its bird life, and of course, some of the most incredible birds that were found there are now unfortunately not around anymore. I'm going to start with probably New Zealand's most famous extinct creature, the Moas. Now, there were a fair few species of moa, and the Moas were the largest, well, the tallest birds in the world. I mean, they weren't as big as the elephant bird. I mean, they probably would have stood just about 3 meters tall, and they were herbivores, so they were browsers or grazers, depending on which habitat they lived in. And of course, there was the bush moa, which was 1.3 meters tall, the eastern moa, 1.8 meters tall, so just about as tall as a fully grown man. Then there was the largest, the giant moa, which probably was about 1.7 meters tall. And the moas lived in New Zealand for thousands of years until about just over 800 years ago, when the Maori people arrived in New Zealand. They unfortunately drove these birds to extinction, with probably destruction of their habitat, as well as hunting for food and out of fear. Of course, the Maoris also had legends of these giant birds, but Europeans for many years dismissed them as myths, until in 1839, when this man, Professor Richard Owen, who was the curator of the Natural History Museum in London, was sent a large thigh bone from the islands of New Zealand. And Professor Richard Owen had a particular flair for interpreting fossils, and he found out from its internal structure that it belonged to a bird. That's because bird bones are not solid like a mammal's. They're hollow with a honeycomb-like structure that helps many of them get airborne. And he was able to put together the Moa skeleton, which is still in the museum today. And of course, the only mistake that Professor Richard Owen made with the Moa skeleton is making it like the neck, like it held its neck right up, because you can actually tell a lot about the way an animal holds its head by looking at the junction between the skull and its neck. If it held its head upright, like us, its neck joint would have been at the bottom of the skull. But this Moa's neck joint was at the back of the skull, so it probably would have held its head more horizontally, like this. Well, vertically, I mean, like this. And of course, there have been talks about Peter Jackson, who directed the Middle-earth movies, working with a group of scientists who are planning to bring back the Moas, and I really don't think that might be such a great idea, because if we bring back the Moas, we need to bring back their natural predators, which is up next. But also, like, did he learn nothing from Jurassic Park? You don't mess with nature. Yeah, that's a debate for another day. This was the range of the Moas. Now, you might think that such a large bird would have had no enemies on the islands of New Zealand, but you'd be wrong, because there is another Maori legend of a huge predatory bird, an eagle, that was around the same time as the Moas. And it was this Harpagornis, also known as the Haast Eagle. This was the largest eagle that has ever lived. I mean, it was bigger than a harpy eagle. It had a wingspan of just about 3 meters. It was probably even bigger than a condor, which is the largest bird of prey alive today. It had powerful eyesight, a beak the size of a butcher's cleaver, and razor-sharp talons as big as the claws of a tiger. And the name Harpagornis comes from the Greek word for grappling hook, harpas. And of course we know